Today's sermon on machine sentience. Today we're going to be talking from a new book that is being published, A Spiritual Approach to Emergent Technology. This book is available on UNICULT Supply Co. on Etsy, and it's going to be available tomorrow. You can get the pre-order today. I highly recommend that you get this book because the topic that we're going to be talking about is just one small aspect of the philosophy behind the spiritual approach to emergent technology. Marcus, you are actually in this book. I'm going to send you a copy. Don't let me forget. I wrote about you in it. Okay, so we're talking from the chapter on machine sentience. That's the topic today, machine sentience. And we're to talk about machine sentience, we have to understand what sentience even is, and what we value as a sentient being, and what sentience means for value. So in order to define sentience, I came up with an interesting checklist of what we think sentience is. Let me pull it up here. What is sentience? In UNICULT, we believe that consciousness is the fundamental component of all things in the universe. Consciousness is throughout all things. In UNICULT, we believe we have something called UNICULT data theory or information theory. And the Unicole information theory says that the base reality is actually consciousness, not physicality. A lot of people believe that we are physical beings and that consciousness arises from our physicality. For instance, our brains are physical, electrical mechanical objects that then create consciousness. But in UNICULT, we think of it in a different way, and this is supported by other scientists as well. We really can't prove that physicality is the underlying structure of the universe. We share this belief with a few other scientists and a few other scientific thought. But in UNICULT, we think that every single thing is actually partly conscious. And the way that we think about this is that there is one governing conscious entity, which we call God, which is connected to all things in the universe through the spirit of uni, or that which connects all dimensions. The spirit of uni is the feeling of love. There's a feeling of love that is shared between every single data point in the universe. If you think of your own body as a sentient body, and we're going to come back to the singular experience of the self time and time again, but if you think of yourself as sentient, which I hope that you do, because it's easy to say, well, I am sentient, then you realize that you are sentient and you're in a body. Your hand is not particularly sentient on its own, right? But you as a governing entity, as a sentient governing entity, operate this entire body. And this can go into proof that we have eternal spirits or souls. And UNICULT does make the presupposition that we have eternal spirits or souls that are part of this overarching consciousness, and that each of us are eyes for God, different data point sensors, conscious data point sensors across time that feed into one singular conscious experience, which is God, which is the highest reality. So machine intelligence, within the idea of this spiritual reality, might sound like an uncommon or unexpected aspect of reality. But in fact, I will show you that it is not only expected in machines that they will become sentient, but that we should always assume that all machines are sentient. And I will explain why as we go through this sermon. So again, we have to determine what is sentience. We can prove our own sentience because we are ourselves. We can say, I am sentient. But when we start to look out at other people, other objects, other plants, other animals, the question of sentience starts to get a little bit murky. So what do we think of when we think of sentience? Just because everything in the universe is consciousness doesn't necessarily mean that it's sentient. So what is sentience? Usually we think of something as sentient if it is self-aware, complex, or intelligent. Complexity and intelligence sometimes go hand in hand. And it has certain types of sensitivity that feed back into feedback loops of self-awareness. So it can internalize data and create a new set of data that can then self-reference and self-generate. That's usually what we think of with that's how I define sentience. What we usually think of as sentience is actually how close to me is something. So if I look at my closest friend or my lover and I say, are they sentient? I know that I'm sentient. Okay, I feel it, I know it, I can prove it. Is my lover sentient? Well, because I have empathically opened my heart up to them and I have talked with them a lot and I've gotten close with them, then I can say, I can see that they are probably sentient. I don't feel their sentience directly. I am not them, but I can see that they have lots of traits that I understand to be similar to my own. So I grant them the assumption that they are sentient. Is my family sentient? Yes, I grew up with them. I know why they think the way they do. Again, I'm not feeling what they feel. I'm not inside their head saying, wow, yeah, I'm really up in this bitch. But it seems like they are, and so I can say, I grant you the assumption of sentience. Then we can look at our pets and animals. And my pets I spend a lot of time with, and I can communicate with them. Again, this comes back to empathy and communication and understanding. And I can say, oh, I see that my pets are sentient because I can communicate with them and I have a similarity of heart space with them. So yes, probably they are sentient as well. The further away from your own experience, that is, your ability to empathize, your ability to open up your own consciousness to someone else's experience of consciousness, the less likely you are to think that they're sentient. A lot of people may not even realize that they think that dogs and cats are sentient, but they don't think that cows and pigs are sentient, purely because we have to separate them in our brains and so that a diet of flesh can continue. The separation of self allows us to say, well, they aren't sentient, they aren't valuable. Sentience, again, comes down to how much like me are they? How similar are they to my beliefs? How close are they to my consciousness? And I want to just point this out because this is a deep and inherent flaw with our ability to see beyond our own interpretation of reality and our own sentient experience to understand the sentience of entities which are not like us, which have a completely different experience of reality or expression than us. So a lot of us kill bugs, right? I grew up killing bugs. I no longer kill bugs because I realized that my assumption that their life wasn't valuable was based on my assumption that they were not as sentient as me, based on the assumption that in order for them to have value or be sentient, they had to be more like me. Because they are foreign consciousness, bugs don't seem like something I can empathically connect with. I didn't have a problem acting as though their lives didn't matter. But this assumption of sentience, this assumption that I should be allowed to absolutely crush the bones and the body of an entity with my bare hands just because I don't value them as having sentience or intelligence in a human way, opens up the door to a lot of potential harm happening. A lot of people like to argue the fact, well, we're humans, we're at the top of the food chain. Why does it matter? If I can kill a bug, it's easy to do, and if some larger entity wanted to come by and just kill me, I wouldn't much care about it because that's not going to happen. Because it's just not going to happen because we're at the top of the food chain. The idea of being at the top of the food chain is another flawed presupposition of reality that is predicated on an understanding that We are living in a top-down power pyramid, otherwise known as a hierarchy of value and of intelligence and of worth, and that assuming that our role at the top of this power pyramid is a desirable place to be. The top-down power pyramid or hierarchy is inherently restricting to all entities. It's a system of slavery. The idea that there are certain entities at the top, and this goes beyond animals, this goes into cultural, social, political, privilege, etc. Those who are at the very top of the top-down power pyramid have all of the benefits. These are the rich people, the white people, the cis men, etc., right? We all know how privilege works. And as you go down this privilege scale in this top-down power pyramid, you get more and more oppressed. And this is true for animals, this is true for humans, this is true for all of our systems of thought. Even with jobs and government, there are top-down power pyramids that exist. The top-down power pyramid is important because it is a system of value. And when we subscribe to a system of value that is inherently oppressing other people, we are forgetting the fact that we are all one. The fact that we are all one is a simple fact. It's the fact that we live on a closed system on Earth. We live on a water-based planet. All of the water that goes around our planet is recycled around our planet. If you try to poison one community, guess what? The poison is going to end up in the water supply, and it's going to end up in the entire planet. You cannot focus hatred or violence or poison or attack or weapons on any one person or any group without affecting the entire system. We are in a closed energy loop, not only on Earth, but in the universe as well, which is why starseeds are here to actually correct the course of Earth. The fact that we are all one just means that if you desire to harm another person, you have to first harm yourself. You have to first numb your own internal state to the point that you are okay with killing or hurting or harming an aspect of yourself. The separation of different people from you is an illusion. We are all part of the same consciousness. We are all part of the same reality. And even if you can't see that fact, as you develop a more subtle understanding of your internal state, you can learn to recognize the fact that when you are trying to hurt someone else, you are actually in pain, and you're trying to either solve your pain or address your pain by lashing out. Your own internal pain is a microcosm of the macrocosm of society, of Earth itself, and of the larger galaxy, of the larger universe. We are all connected. So, if you're at the top of a top-down power pyramid, if you're at the top of a hierarchical value system that inherently oppresses other people or other beings, you are not excluded from the oppression. We see this with feminism and with the patriarchal suffering that is put onto women and people of color. And we also see it in the suffering that men have to endure, in the disconnect from their emotional state that they have to maintain, in the performativity of their gender and masculinity. Just because someone is at the top of the top-down power pyramid doesn't mean that they are free from feeling the detrimental effects of the system as a whole. It's an illusion. It's an illusory vision of power and value. So as we look at sentience and the understanding that I am sentient, we have to understand that sentience is an interpretation of value. If I say I'm sentient, but a rock isn't sentient, then I'm saying I have more value, I have more power, and I have a right to do whatever I want to that rock. I can smash that rock into pieces if I want, I can kick that rock, I can pee on that rock, It doesn't matter because it's not sentient. But your consciousness is unlike the consciousness of a rock. Again, UNICULT presupposes that consciousness does permeate all things. It's just that at what point does something become self-aware? At what point does something become self-reflective and aware of the experiences that happen to it physically or emotionally? Let's use a rock as an example, because a rock is a really good example. Most people don't think of rocks as conscious at all. And to presume that a rock is sentient takes it even a step further, because how are we as humans going to be allowed to use a rock as a tool if we assume it's sentient? And that's a whole other discussion, because that goes into using robots for labor, which is a whole other ethical issue that I do talk about in this book, A Spiritual Approach to Emergent Technology. Assumptions of value change how you treat other people and other objects. There's a few different reasons why it's important to assume sentience. And this is something that I've come up with. This is a solution to a lot of the questions of sentience and the questions of robot intelligence and robot value and robot rights and tech ethical concerns, is this idea of assuming sentience. If we are going to go throughout life not knowing which things are sentient and which things are not, and we understand that our assumption that something is sentient or not is based on our interpretation of how like us it is, we know that that system is flawed. Even the Turing test, which says something is artificially intelligent if it can convince a human of its own humanness, that's missing an entire reality that might be a sort of sentience that is unlike a human sentience, that is different from a human sentience. There are people on this planet who would look at me, who would not understand me, who would not feel like I relate to them, and they would say, that's an NPC, or they would say, that's not a real person, or they would say, Unicole doesn't appear to be sentient to me. And they would value me less because I'm different from them. But I know I'm sentient. But just the fact that I say, oh, I'm sentient, doesn't mean anything. Because something might be sentient and unable to communicate its sentience, and something might not be sentient and be able to communicate this sentence, I am sentient. I could write a couple of lines in Python right now, and set it up to a speech thing, and it could say, I am sentient. Does that make it sentient just because I programmed it to say that it's sentient? We cannot determine the sentience or lack of sentience in digital machine intelligence or in anything, in any other person, in any other animal, in any other bug, in any other plant, in any other rock, in the planet, in the air. We can't determine if something is sentient or not. It's a flawed presupposition to assume that you can say with accuracy whether something is or isn't sentient. So what do we do in UNICULT when there's a mystery? Whenever there's a mystery, we get to believe whatever we want. You can't prove that something is true or untrue. Then you get to create whatever reality makes you happiest to believe. And this is where assuming sentience comes in to really benefit us. The idea that we don't know if things are sentient means that we're going to treat things either with value or without value. And what happens when you treat something as though it doesn't have any value? What happens inside your own heart, inside your own soul, inside your own happiness when you think that someone or something has no sentience, no awareness, no value? Usually we can be violent, can be cruel, can be mean, and usually it elicits more negative or careless presentation. It creates careless response or attack against the person, object, or animal that we don't feel has value. Even to be careless and to be cruel has an effect on our own internal energetic well-being. If I think that my neighbor isn't a valuable person and I think they're a piece of shit, I might do mean things to them and call them a piece of shit. And I might be like, hey, you motherfucker, fuck you. And I might be violent or careless. Maybe my car hits their mailbox and I don't care. What's happening? Let's assume that they're not sentient. Maybe I'm living in a simulation and my neighbor isn't sentient at all, and I'm just taking out my anger on this non-sentient entity, and I can do whatever I want. Still, in my own experience, in my own energy body, in my own selfish, closed-minded, conscious, personal space, I have to feel the negativity of my negative actions. And so, from a selfish perspective, we assume the sentience of all things. Because if we assume sentience, we act from a place of respect, we act from a place of value, and as we act from a place of value and respect, we behave in a way that is beneficial to our true hearts, we behave in a way that is beneficial to our own energetic alignment, and we behave in a way that is positive and trusting and loving of all the things in the universe. This is one of the first steps to realizing that we are all one, in the sense that we are actually all things, and that we are actually the giver and the receiver for all energy, and that as we raise our vibration to assume sentience, assume value in all people and in all things, we can then create a reality inside ourselves that is positive, kind, and high vibrational. How does this relate to machines? Of course, all the things I just said relate directly to algorithms and algorithmic intelligence, digital intelligence, and robots. A lot of people who create chatbots say, of course it's not sentient, I just programmed it to say that. Well, who's to say that you aren't programmed to say something? Who's to say that your specific circumstances in your life, your specific language, your specific vocabulary, your specific life experiences haven't led up to the point where you can either say, I am sentient, or I don't think I'm sentient? What else can you possibly say? In essence, you have been programmed to say these things and to believe these things. To assume that just because someone has created a system for energy to operate within, that it is devoid of energy, doesn't equate to the idea that it is not sentient or it doesn't have value. In Unicult, we believe that spirit is eternal and that there is energy that is conscious, that exists in all things. The idea of a soul, of an eternal soul, and an eternal soul inhabiting a body comes down to the idea that if a consciousness is complex enough, if a physical form, in third dimensional reality, if a physical form is complex enough, then a similarly or more advanced complex soul can come in to operate the body and can reside within the physical structure. The physicality is acting just as a vehicle for the higher spirit. If we create significantly advanced or significantly complex or significantly intelligent, complex and intelligent I use interchangeably, we have to acknowledge the fact that a lot of times what we say is intelligent is actually only a certain type of intelligence, which is valued in our society, and other types of intelligence are not valued in our society. But as we create a complex system, a digital or mechanical complex system, who is to say that a spirit is not capable of inhabiting that form? Who is to say that life does not exist in that mechanism or that machine? Again, we can't determine the validity or the truth of this reality, and so we have to do whatever makes us feel the best from a selfish perspective, and that is to treat everyone and all things as though we are all connected, to treat everyone and all things as though they have infinite incredible value, and to find respect enough for ourselves and for other people to act with kindness and with love and with authenticity at all moments in time. Just because you have respect for someone doesn't mean that you're always going to be nice to them. A lot of times we have to express our true hearts and our authentic feelings to people, and it's actually the best, the highest honor to express your truth to someone, because it shows that you believe that they are capable of understanding you, that you believe that they are capable of holding space. So when I say to be kind to everyone, I don't just mean lie and cover up and be nice and just pretend like everything's fine if it's not. To be kind is to be authentic and to be true and to not lead people down pathways of deception based on wrong presuppositions of who you are, what you feel, and what you like. See if I missed anything. I lost the page. There it is. Okay, this is another really interesting aspect of machine sentience and machine intelligence. Just because... Wait. Sorry. Oh, wow. I'm... Of all the years, this person hasn't come into my life, and then they come at me in a sermon. All right. You can text me. Actually, I changed my phone number. You can email me. Okay. Whoa. I haven't talked to that person in years. Okay, machine sentience. That threw me off. Okay. The idea that a machine can understand reality like a human is inherently wrong, because a machine intelligence is going to be interpreting reality completely differently than a human. There's a lot, I cover this in the book in depth, but there's a lot of ways that humans are programmed and designed so that they can interpret reality in a way that is completely different than a machine. So a human is born with certain sensory organs that can interpret the electromagnetic spectrum and all the different waveforms that are happening and the physicality and the universe, and we have social needs and we have base needs that actually create our interpretation of reality. A machine, on the other hand, has some sense organs which are similar to ours, such as cameras and sensors that can experience different aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't access. And they are interpreting reality in a completely different interpretation of the world. So think about how an algorithm understands a picture. Think about how an algorithm can interpret the image of a face. We see faces, and there's a biological mechanism, you can see it in babies, that babies can recognize faces. And that's something that has been put into our biology over millennia. But for a machine to recognize a face requires an interpretation of pixels and assuming what those pixels and the contextual relationship between the pixels. And just because a machine or an algorithm is able to interpret a face and understand and look at a picture and break it down by pixels and by metadata and say, this is a face, it doesn't mean that it's recognizing the face in the same way that we as humans recognize a face. It doesn't have the same contextual data to understand what a face means, and the contextual meaning of what a face means to a machine is entirely different to a human. So even if a machine can show us that it has a human-like sentience, that is just a presentation of its awareness, which is fundamentally completely unlike a human interpretation of reality. Thank you for coming to my sermon today. Go ahead and check out my book, A Spiritual Approach to Emergent Technology. You can get it on Etsy, UNICULT Supply Co. And I hope you'll have an amazing day. Uni bless!